Hello, we are the Dorset Club Men. We are reenactors portraying the Elizabethan Tudor militiamen based here in Weymouth during the time of 1560 to 1588, during the Spanish Armada crisis. We have here two particular types of men, myself dressed as a far more wealthier and far more well-equipped militia musketeer of the time, and we have my colleague here, Ben, who's also dressed as a part-timer militiaman. Our roles, particularly during this period, would have been coastal watches. We would have been organising garrisons in forts, particularly over at Portland Castle as a very good example, including over here where originally the Nothe had a gun emplacement watching the harbour side, including over into the actual harbour itself. We had obviously rudimentary equipment. We have muskets available to us at the time. Originally we had at the time the fishtail musket. We would have had matchlocks, and then eventually upgrading into the flintlock system, as you can see here. This would have been a very, very wealthy piece of equipment during the time of the Elizabethan era, particularly because the advantage of this weapon is that you can fire it far easier in watery and wet conditions, particularly living by the coastline, than you can with a matchlock system that requires a constant burning wick. We also have, of course, different types of weapons being on use here. We have a slightly later musket that's used during the sort of Jacobean period. It sort of comes into around about the time of the English Civil War, which Ben is currently sporting and holding, which is a later precursor to the Brown Bess, which does replace the rifle that he's holding. We're of course dressed in the traditional garb of the clubmen, so we would have these hose, these trousers, particularly the sort of waistline shorts. They would usually be traditionally made of wool. It'd be quite hot, and particularly on a hot day like today, it would be a little bit hot and a bit sweaty. We also have doublies, these wonderful jackets that we're wearing. Mine actually has the ability to have sleeves that I can take off and put on at my own free will. Ben, however, is wearing just a traditional civilian doublet, as you can see here, which has no sleeves on his jacket, which means that his arms are open to the elements the whole time. He's also wearing a wonderful, nice Tudor cap, or a bonnet, or a beret, if you'd like to call it that. And I am wearing what is here called a cassobeck helmet. One would assume that it is almost reminiscent of a Spanish Morin helmet. However, these particular type of helmets aren't actually Spanish. Everyone was using them in Europe at the time, and everyone was creating their own versions. This particular one is an English cassobeck, and it also has a nice little top to stop sword blows landing on top of your head. The weapons that we're carrying obviously were black powder fired weapons, and these would be supplied by black powder worn in our apostles here on our bandoliers. These would be immediately charged into your rifle. So Ben, you're going to demonstrate loading your rifle. So you're going to first prepare your butt. You're going to open up your apostles, and you're going to put some black powder into the barrel. From there, you would then proceed to reach into your pouch and acquire yourself a piece of wadding and a musket shot ball, which will be wrapped together. Loading that into your rifle, you would then scour your musket, taking out your ramrod. This would then be inserted, ramming it home. A nice bit of enthusiasm goes a long way. Returning your musket and the ramrod, you would then proceed to make ready. At high port arms, you would then cock the frizzen, and then loading from your powder horn some powder into your pan, and then blowing off any residue powder. This is to prevent extra burning. You would then proceed to high port arms, where you would then receive the word to take aim and give fire, creating a wonderful, nice bit of pyrotechnics and explosion. Failing, a musketeer is able to fire off his shot at the enemy, and during this particular time, the muskets weren't entirely too accurate. We usually like to fire them around about 150 paces. We would then, if we were to engage with people on the ground, particularly infantry or cavalry, you would then butt your musket or lift your butt, and this would then turn your very nice big heavy rifle into a fearsome nasty club, which you could then batter your opponent with. And of course, like all other musketeers, particularly important and wealthier ones, I am also carrying, of course, a nice basket hilt rapier. I would be trained to effectively use this. This would be originally a gentleman's weapon. However, as the metallurgy at the time became cheaper and far more easier to mass produce these, this becomes far more widely used by pretty much anyone. So it becomes less of a gentleman's weapon and now more of a standard issue piece of equipment. Into the English Civil War, which comes a little bit later, only 40 years from my period, you have then tuck swords which are coming in, and these are effectively a very small, very mass-produced, cheap version of almost like a cutlass and a broadsword. And those are very, very cheap to make, and they are then becoming the standard sidearm of the musketeers during this time. These are then replaced by short sword bayonets and also plug bayonets that come in during the later periods, particularly in the Battle of Culloden and Jacobite Wars. They become the primary then standard use of equipment on the musketeers and riflemen during the age of line infantry. So if you're interested in learning more about us, or you'd like to get involved, we also run a Roman reenactment group called Numerus I Durotrigum. The link is going to be inside the video, and if you'd like to join our Tudor period, the club men, we'll also provide a link to you as well below in the video. Hope you've enjoyed this video, and also big shout out to the Nothe Gunnery and the Nothe Garrison for hosting us here today. They've been absolutely wonderful sports, and if you'd like to please come along and join them, they are also looking for fantastic people like yourselves, the viewer. Their link is also in the video below. Thank you very much.